SCBAs, fire axes, squirt water on things. They're heroes, and we treat them as such. But we also need the fire marshal. The fire marshal shows up with a clipboard and the pocket protector, and they help us make better decisions by saying things like, let's not store flammables next to ignition sources. So we're the fire marshals. We're the people who provide the strategies and longer-term plans for good asset stewardship. We're the fire marshals, consistently working to prevent fires from ever happening. The challenge that most asset management teams face is getting pulled back into this reactive mode. It feels good. We're good at it. We can solve many of these challenges, but we need to stay focused to deliver our function, which is asset management. I'll talk more about this in a second. Just like we don't want our senior leadership in day-to-day reactive activities, we need them working on strategic thinking and kind of working in that realm, applying principles, setting clarity on our agency objectives, not making reactionary decisions. We don't want them down in the weeds. We need to take a similar perspective with assets. We can't be so far down in the weeds that we don't have this bird's eye view. We have people who are experts at managing our assets. Let's be the experts in asset management. Again, I know everybody here is familiar with this 6-box model of the IAM. Most of our time, we focus on this life cycle delivery. We even are getting more into asset information, strategy, and planning as those things are now in our TAMP. But the who delivers these and how our organizations are structured to support this is kind of a bigger question. So here are some of those questions that I have. Do we have the resources necessary to deliver on our plans? Are we building this technical expertise within our agencies? How can we possibly align all the outputs of our asset management system to these organizational targets if no one's responsible to connect all those moving parts? So what have the feds done to help us out? Well, really, I think they've done a lot. One of the biggest things they've done is they've named an accountable executive. So accountable executive is a single identifiable person who has the ultimate responsibility for carrying out the transit asset management practices and control or direction over the human and capital resources needed to develop and maintain both the agency's safety management systems and asset management plans. So why I read that? It's because we have an accountable executive, but do we have and have we identified the resources to actually do the work? So to improve, there must be action and people with responsibility for their actions. I can't think of a single department or function within our agencies where sitting around and thinking makes things better. So what does an asset management practitioner do? Kind of what are the chances, or tell me one thing your agency is great at where you don't have experts. Actual people assigned to deliver on a function. Doesn't expertise require experts? What if we let everyone do their own corporate IT or engineering? Sure, I know we all wear lots of hats, but I'd venture to guess that no agency is great at something without people working to make it happen. How would our routes and schedules look if service planning and scheduling was handled by everyone as other duties as assigned? So it seems obvious to me that to be consistently good at something, someone needs to be responsible for it and someone should know something about it. So that brings me to, what does asset management deliver? What's different when we start talking about asset management is many people aren't sure what's happening without it. So when you want to build something, you might hire an engineer. The product that they deliver is known, right? If you hire an engineer, you're going to get plans and drawings and specifications. So we need to be clear on what doesn't happen without AM experts. Or said another way, what will an asset management team deliver? So this is just a short list of what I think an asset management team actually delivers to an agency. And these things don't happen without people focusing on delivering them. So this brings us to the challenge of asset management. And I think Chuck Austin says it best. He says that asset management practitioners are the bridge between technical operations and financial experts. Someone needs to turn an unconstrained best acquisition, maintenance, and renewal plan into a viable business case that financial decision makers will feel confident enough to invest in. Asset management practitioners effectively mediate conflicting priorities by balancing cost, risk, and performance. If they are effective, both engineers and finance people are happy and the system performs efficiently and effective for operations. Without asset management practitioners, finance people can tend not to trust ops or engineering because they seem to overstate their case. Ops and engineering feel as though they must overstate their case to get enough money to maintain assets. So good asset management can be the grease that allows these gears to work well together and aligns our system outputs to our purpose. This brings us to our 5 steps. So I think these might be the first 5 steps you could take in building a team. So we've talked about what asset management is and what it delivers. How do we find people to actually deliver this function? So what are the steps to get started? We have to start with some training. We need to have some idea of what level of resources we might need. We need to understand the range of skills and experience necessary. And then we should talk to one another. We should learn from each other. There's lots of lessons to be learned. And then finally, we build a formal business case. So jumping right into step 1, get some training. Seems nearly impossible to me to implement good asset management with no one who knows much about it, right? But we also have to keep in mind that a barrier to learning anything is believing you already know it. But when we look at this list, we're saying, well, okay, once we have our own training, we also need training for senior leadership. Well, why? I think we could agree that asset management, for it to really be successful and achieve this culture shift that Ms. Shadoni Smith and John Georges and Bob Tosillo have talked about, we need that top-down commitment to change. And how we garner that commitment from senior leadership is we actually need them to understand their role in the stewardship of public assets. So, step 2. We've talked about the what asset management delivers and the why it's critical. Agencies only have people and assets. Those are really the only 2 things we have. And without one or the other, we can't deliver on our purpose of moving people. So dedicated resources is the how we intend to deliver. We have an accountable executive, but who's responsible to actually do the work? Remember, we can't just think things better. We need a team or at least some dedicated resources with a priority to deliver. Again, asset management is that grease in the gears. This coordination across the agency isn't easy to accomplish. Someone will need to actually focus on delivering it. So let's talk a little bit about who. To deliver asset management, we need people with specific knowledge, skills, abilities, combined with practical experience. To start with, we're going to need some people with general business acumen, some mechanical and electrical engineering theory basics, some maintenance skills, the ability to communicate, an understanding of finance and risk and probabilistic thinking, and of course we need basic skills like numeracy combined with statistics, data visualization. And I'm not talking about someone who can create a pivot table or graph in Excel. We need technical experts that are good with data structuring and analytics. They need to have knowledge of dozens of different asset classes from IT, infrastructure to buses. So this blend isn't particularly common. So I'm calling it the asset management platypus. It isn't that they don't exist, but there aren't a lot of them out there. So maybe instead of trying to find a platypus who will be able to do everything, but not do anything great, let's build a team. So what do we need in a team, right? We need this balance of technical and business strategy. We need good systems thinker. We need to have this and then what, right? We built something new or we're planning something new and then what? Who will maintain it? How will we fund it, right? All of those things require good communication skills, probabilistic and scenario thinking, openness to change and being wrong. And then finally, enough leadership skills to get other people to buy into new ways of doing business. This brings us to step 4. I sometimes think about this as the library or bookshelf of experts. I'm particularly fortunate because I have an in-house knowledge bookshelf with our TD's team. But when I need to know something, I also have access to a wider library of experts. There are always people who know more than I do. They're domain experts, and at the very least, they ask better questions than I do. Right? We also have other resources. FTA's website has a mountain of information. We have APTA standards groups, TRB, NCHRP, AASHTO. the IAM, we have consultants. We can also look to other areas such as utility companies who've been grappling with similar challenges for years. The idea here is that we learn and share. It's our responsibility as practitioners to be learners. So step 5, we've collected information in the first 4 steps. So now we can start our business case. Asset management is about planning and options, right? Make the case. Provide options. I touched on resources on the last slide. Did everyone notice that the updated TAM plan guide that the FTA put out back in 2016, they added a section called Develop an Asset Management Business Case. And our TAM element 8 should actually, I believe, document our plans that encompass our asset resourcing strategy, right? That includes the asset management resourcing strategy. So finally, I know this is an FTA webinar. More generally, we focus on the TAM plan elements. But if we take a step back and examine what, why, and how asset management supports better business practices, we find that Dr. Penny Burns has already described this for us. I believe all of us are either in phase 1 or phase 2, and I can't imagine anybody's going to get through phase 2, and certainly no one would be able to deliver phase 3 without some dedicated resources to actually do these things. So kind of talking about this, we've discussed that what it is we're going to deliver, that we actually have to deliver it. We need some people who are experts to deliver it. And then finally, we're kind of wrapping this back up with, these are the things that we're trying to accomplish for our agencies. Again, there's a guidebook. My hope is that people take a look at this and provide feedback so that collectively we can make a better guidebook for the future. I know that I wish there would have been something that helped us at RTD so we avoided some of the mistakes that we made. And hopefully if we collectively learn from one another, we will put together a guidebook that helps others. And finally, to wrap things up, I want to publicly thank all the people who do the majority of the great work and made this guidebook possible. Ruth Walsgrove with AMCL, and of course the RTD Denver Asset Management team, and finally to the FTA and everyone who's on this call participating today. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou. We appreciate your comments. Are there any questions for Lou that we have? Great. We'll also have some opportunities for questions after both presentations have come and went, so feel free to write your questions in the chat box, and then we will answer them after the second presentation. So I think Lou's presentation gave us a great review of kind of what asset management is and how to develop a team within your organization. And it's good to note that this links back to element 8 of the 9 elements of TAM. So like asset inventory and decision tools. Well, element 8 is resources, and people are one of those resources. And just a note about the booklet or the guidebook that Lou mentioned. We just want to note that this is not an FTA resource. This is a free resource written by one of our public agency presenters on how you can effectively develop your asset management team. So you'll be able to download it here or from the recording, and you can also email the presenter to get a copy. So now we'll talk about how you might plan development for your team. So Denise Longley and Randy Lamm at LA Metro are going to talk about how they are developing their workforce. And APTA actually did a write-up about them because LA Metro is doing some pretty cutting-edge things, which they will be talking about today. So I will just make sure that we're switching over. And then Denise and Randy, you can take it away. Sorry, technical difficulty.
Well, good morning and good afternoon to everyone. While we're waiting for our slides to come up, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Denise Longley, Deputy Executive Officer of Metro's Enterprise Transit Asset Management Department, and I'm here to present with Randy Lamm, who's the Director of ETAM, on recent efforts at Metro to estimate SGR workforce needs and initiatives to develop the future transit workforce in Los Angeles.
Sorry about that. Denise and Randy, take it away.
All right. Our presentation includes a brief ETAM overview. Randy will then present on the development of the SGR FTE model and describe the inputs, methodology, and results. Then I will follow up with some examples of efforts to replenish LA Metro's workforce, such as youth initiatives, career academy, transportation schools, Win LA, and the Rail Vehicle Maintenance Apprenticeship Program and the Workforce Institute. The ETAM department was created in 2015 by Phil Washington when ETAM was added to the Risk and Safety Department, therefore becoming Risk, Safety, and Asset Management, which is autonomous from operations, construction, planning, and finance. ETAM is responsible for maintaining the asset inventory database, conducting condition assessments, making links between the needs and the asset inventory, long-range planning, and the annual budget. ETAM also develops the TAM plan and implements the various TAM-related business process change actions, among other things. I will now turn it over to Randy Lamm to present on the full-time equivalent workforce estimation tool.
Thank you, Denise. Good morning or good afternoon. And thank you to Lou for the presentation on staffing TAM departments and also to FTA and Volpe. This presentation is a little different than Lou's. It's about the process we are developing to estimate staffing for actual SGR capital projects as opposed to staffing a TAM department. This presentation, gotta get to my slide. This presentation is a very simplified overview of a very detailed data-intensive process where we actually converted our TAM inventory database where we have cash flows for replacement of assets from a cost-based cash flow to an FTE-based staffing flow. The purpose of the TAM FTE estimation model is to provide a consistent process for estimating internal and external, that is contracted FTE needs for replacing and rehabbing assets. It also helps to increase Metro's TAM maturity by satisfying one of our TAM action plans for workforce capacity planning. The goal is to understand the steady state, that is the average long-term, say 10-year horizon staffing levels by skill type needed to address the schedule for delivery of SGR projects. And some caveats. This presentation is to provide an overview of the process. This is a work in progress where it is still under review, and the figures we're presenting today are for demonstration purposes only. That is why we are showing the needs as a percentage of the totals. FTEs can change by department because the work flow, the work of the projects can shift between departments. For example, between our construction or what we call program management versus our operations departments. So why do we need an FTE estimation tool? Well, in our asset management work that we've done so far, we have a pretty good handle. We know how to estimate funding needs for SGR for asset replacement. We currently have a constrained capacity for project delivery, but we don't have a reliable process to estimate the human capital needs for SGR capital projects. We are striving to program funding for $6 billion in SGR needs coming due over the next 10 years. We are facing the challenge of an aging and retiring workforce, and we are currently delivering a massive schedule of major new capacity projects, all in time for the 2028 Olympics. So what can an FTE estimation tool do? Well, first, to assist us, we engaged Bob Peskin and John Swartz from AECOM to help us develop the FTE estimation tool. The tool essentially replaces dollars with fractional FTEs for each asset in our asset inventory. And the tool can help answer the basic FTE questions we have, like how many FTEs are needed over time, by department, by job class, by SGR project or asset, and by staffing scenario, whether in-house or external, or more typically a combination of both. So for the process of developing the FTE tool, This is a very simplified overview of the process to develop the model, which is based on both actual data and assumptions that we make to generate our initial estimates. The development process starts with actual data, such as our asset inventory database, which is a large database consisting of 24,000 records and 400,000 plus assets. And then from that, we developed what we call a prototype SGR project list to address the replacement of those assets, basically a prototype list of assets coming due in the same location at the same time of the same type. And then we have a list of our departments that work on SGR projects, a list of job classifications that typically work on SGR projects, and then we add our assumptions. We assume scenarios of who does the work, whether it's done primarily in-house with Metro staff or by contractors for the hard costs, or a combination of Metro and contractors for soft costs. Then we have assumptions about hours per FTE. We typically assume 1,730 hours per FTE, a work distribution percentage across departments and across job classifications. Then we develop global parametric FTE factors and apply them across the asset database. We then have some initial estimates which are revised and then reported out by department, asset category, job class, etc. So the procedure for running the model involves an iterative process of informed judgments. The global initial estimates are developed from industry standards like means manuals and consultant experience. These are supplemented with our actual Metro experience, such as a recent major SGR rehab project where we rebuilt our oldest light rail line. We called this project the New Blue, where we shut it down for 8 months and rebuilt it. This gave us some real life examples of staffing for SGR projects. Then we validate our initial estimates with interviews, and we ask the questions, are we in the ballpark? And we get our asset owners' opinions on that. And realizing that there is no perfect information, and if we were holding out to get the perfect information, it would take forever to get it. We follow up with feeding information from validation interviews back into the model for updated, refined estimates. The results are reported for consideration by decision makers. And now I'm going to just briefly talk about some of the calculations for developing our FTE factors. At the top of this slide are 2 examples of how global parametric factors are developed, and the bottom half of the slide explains the staffing scenarios and a little explanation of soft and hard costs. The top left table illustrates a parametric for an engineer FTE factor for a roof replacement project that's developed directly from rates for hours per square foot from standard production rates from means manuals and applied to the quantity of roof replacement. On the right, top right, we illustrate a parametric for an engineer FTE factor for an entire building replacement where the production rate is derived from the asset replacement cost and hourly labor rates, resulting in labor hours for quantity of asset replacement. The bottom left table describes 2 scenarios. The first is Metro does all the professional services and construction and installation. Scenario 2 is a combination of Metro and contractors doing the work. And Metro typically provides most of the professional services, and contractors can sometimes provide staff augmentation. And this next slide gives a view into the internals of the model. We're showing on the top by asset group how assumptions on work distribution are allocated by department and job class, and these can change over time as some of these projects might be done by our project management construction department and other times by operations. And now for some findings. So the next 3 slides show our results as we are still reviewing. We're describing the results in terms of % of total FTEs. The upper table shows the peak needs are in the early years due to the backlog, and the average steady state FTE needs is represented as the orange line as a 10% average annual needs of the total needs for the 10-year time period. The bottom chart shows the total needs by job class, with maintenance specialists being the category representing the most jobs with 48% of the needs. Here we're showing needs by major asset category and department. The top table shows the largest FT needs are in rolling stock at 53%, followed by infrastructure 25% and facilities 21%. The bottom table shows that the largest needs are in operations, followed by program management, procurement, and other departments play a smaller role. And this slide shows how the model can report estimates of FTEs by job class for a department, where in operations, again, the greatest need is for maintenance specialists. The bottom chart illustrates estimates of FTEs needed for asset replacement projects for the infrastructure category, with maintenance specialists, inspectors, analysts, and engineers having the greatest need. These are the average annual FTEs to deliver the project needs over the next 10 years. And finally, based on our current scenarios, Metro staff represents 58% of the needs, and contracted staff is estimated to represent 42% of the needs to deliver SGR projects over the next 10 years. The large spike in the initial year is inclusive of the existing backlog of SGR projects. Okay, and now that we have described our staffing needs, we will discuss initiatives to develop the needed workforce, one of which is a proposal by our CEO, Phil Washington, to establish a manufacturing industrial park in partnership with suppliers to develop the next generation of LA Metro rolling stock with new technology and a local workforce with new electromechanical software and manufacturing skills. I'll hand it over now to Denise, who will talk about some of the initiatives that Metro is undertaking to develop a pool of qualified workers.
All right, thanks, Randy. So Metro and likely other transit agencies are facing major workforce challenges. While the needs for skilled and experienced staff is increasing, the current workforce is aging and the institutional knowledge is leaving with the acceleration and the wave of retirements Metro is now facing, and which will continue for the foreseeable future. At the same time, there are a lot of jobs that will need to be filled due to the many new capacity projects as well as SGR projects that Metro is currently building and planning on implementing. However, there is a shortage of potential workers who have the needed skills, training, and experience. There's a high degree of overlap between the kinds of workers needed to build new rail lines and the types of workers needed to staff the SGR projects to maintain them. As an FYI, the programs that I will be talking about are not overseen by the Asset Management Group. We are presenting them today to show some of the ways Metro is addressing these challenges. As a result, Metro is optimistic that these initiatives may also offer some potential opportunities to help with addressing and mitigating the homeless epidemic in Los Angeles. Metro is focusing efforts to get the next generations and young people interested in careers in transportation. The Expose, Educate, Employ initiative includes internships, mentorships, teacher fellowships. This is to expose youth to educational options and experiences that can translate to jobs in the transportation industry. A major E3 initiative for youth is the Transportation Career Academy program, known as TCAP, which provides 7-week summer internships for junior and senior high school students. TCAP provides interns paid real work experience in a career pathway or specific technical area in transportation, as well as mentorship. Next is the Seed School of Los Angeles. Metro is partnering in a mixed-use development project which combines a Seed Foundation boarding school for at-risk youth with affordable housing, a training center, and retail space to provide economic development in South Central Los Angeles. The project will establish a state-of-the-art vocational and college preparatory boarding school for 6th through 12th grades, with students recruited from the Department of Children and Family Services, the Child Welfare System, and surrounding communities. The school serves as a potential entry point for the industry and Metro's Career Pathways program, which begins the path to skilled transportation jobs. The mixed-use development project also includes opportunities for adults with a training center for jobs in transit. The Workforce Initiative now in Los Angeles includes career coaching, education, training, and support services, for instance, childcare, for career pathway opportunities in construction, operations, maintenance, administration, and professional services. Metro also partners with Los Angeles Trade Technical College on the Joint Apprenticeship Committee program to provide advancement opportunities for ATU union members to progress into rail vehicle maintenance specialist jobs. The JAC program includes training in electronics, mechanical systems, communications, and diagnostics. The Transportation Workforce Initiative includes a youth academy for high school students to explore the transportation industry during a 5-week summer session. This concludes our presentation on current actions to understand and respond to Metro's workforce needs. We now turn it back to Emily. Thank you.
This is Lexa. I'll actually be taking over from Emily for this part. Thank you, Denise and Randy, for that presentation. That was really helpful. I see 3 questions kind of in the bottom that I want to kind of go over, and I apologize in advance if I crush any names. First, from Chad Cumberworth, more of a general question. What about for small urban transit authorities? Is the TAM plan just as important as for a larger urban transit provider? And let me know if this answer doesn't answer your question, and then I'll also ask the presenters if they want to chime in. If I understand it correctly, what you're asking is a TAM plan important for smaller providers, just as important as it is for smaller providers as it is for larger providers? And what I would say is that the rule is designed so that a smaller provider doesn't have as many burdens on them to create things. So we linked this to the 8th element, which is resources. And resources, out of the 9 elements, a smaller provider, so ones that do not operate rail or have less than 101 vehicles in maximum service, are only really responsible for 4 of those elements. So the asset inventory, condition assessment, the decision support tool, and the investment prioritization. The presentation today was what we're really kind of seeing is like cutting edge or the future or what's happening now, and they can have ideas for things that you could use at your organization, but they may well be things that you're not able to use right now. In addition, the template will hopefully help smaller agencies to create and modify their own TAM plans, which could be a tool to assist smaller agencies to do that, and then also just focusing on asset management as a business practice that connects various parts of your agency together to help sort of move things forward in an integrated way. So it connects asset management, maintenance in terms of what the assets are, maintenance, finance, kind of what the capital planning looks like, to connect all those parts of your organization. And now I want to ask the presenters if there's anything they would want to chime in on about.
I think you answered it.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, the only thing I would add is that, like I mentioned, that we just have people and assets, and we should have plans for our people and plans for our assets. And to do that, it becomes important for all of us, kind of regardless of our size.
Okay, great. So the next question from Joaquin Bean is, can the FTE estimation tool estimate by type of vehicle? And I think this is a question for Randy.
Yes, it can. You know, we're basically developing small fractional estimates for each asset in our inventory, so we can do that. Our focus initially is to come up with sort of a big picture, you know, steady state long-term staffing needs by various categories, but at the core of it, we do have information at the asset level.
Great. And the next question from Juan Lergue, how can the FTE tool compensate when funding isn't available at the time of the scheduled project? And I think, Randy, this is again for you.
So the tool it's to provide information for decision making. It's not, you know, it doesn't say, it doesn't mandate giving anyone anything. It just identifies the magnitude of the need, just as our asset inventory identifies the magnitude of need for dollars for asset replacement. our FTE tool documents how many FTEs are needed to support those asset replacements. Actually hiring FTEs to address that need or providing funding to support that, that's part of the process of the budget process, the long-range planning process.
Okay, great. And the next question is from Satyan Patel. It also looks like a more general one. Is the FTA's expectation that the Formula 53 funds can be used to establish the human resources needed to establish agencies' TAM programs, and are these resources expected to be transferred to operating or due to the nature of TAM expected to remain on capital? And what I would say is that's a pretty specific question that we'll follow up with you afterwards and make sure that you get an answer to that question. But I don't know if that's one that I'm able to answer here. Are there any other questions? I see one from Luke Westland. The question is, the asset management team at RTD has been evolving for several years now. Anything you would have done differently? Lou, this is a question for you.
Yes, and actually that is something that is covered in the guidebook. We learned a lot. We started off putting a lot of resources towards what turned out to be duplicated work, understanding the condition of some of our fleet vehicles, and we've since taken a step back from some of those efforts and really focused more on how do we develop better information to build better asset management plans so that we can understand what things need to be renewed in what time frame, based on what maintenance interval, based on what future outcome. Can we actually deliver those things, sort of a deliverability piece? And those things changed how we started and where we're at now. I'm not doing a great job here, but in the beginning we were focused very heavily on going out and doing vehicle inspections and facility inspections, which we still do. But we've since taken a step back, and we've been able to improve the information that's collected in the maintenance side of the house, which helps us make better decisions in our asset management plan.
Great, thanks. So I don't see any other questions here. So I want to just close this webinar by saying thank you so much for attending. I hope that you gathered something valuable today. Again, the presentations will be available for download, and the recorded webinar will be posted. You'll see that as a follow-up in a Gov delivery notice or in a separate email. And I want to thank the presenters, Denise, Randy, and Lou, for their time today, as well as sharing their expertise and information. Thanks again. Oh.